Intelligence is hard to measure. It might be impossible to measure. IQ tests were an attempt to evaluate students' intelligence when Donald Trump was a kid, but they have been largely abandoned because intelligence is a multi-dimensional, dynamic, fluid brain function that cannot be reliably and consistently captured for everyone in any test. SAT tests are really just tests of knowledge, not intelligence. You can memorize your way to very high scores on SATs, but the capacity for memorization is not intelligence. Machines can memorize. Once you begin to try to describe what intelligence is, you see the difficulty of trying to measure it. But Donald Trump, of course, knows none of this. Donald Trump firmly believes that intelligence is measurable and describable, especially his own.
I went to an Ivy League college. I was a nice student. I did very well. I'm a very intelligent person.
There are murderers who went to Ivy League colleges. There are rapists who went to those schools, tax criminals. Ivy League colleges have produced just about every kind of criminal you can think of since the first one opened its doors 381 years ago. And since Donald Trump seems to believe that Ivy League colleges use measurable intelligence in their admissions process, he must then believe that the Ivy League colleges that have always and forever been regarded as better than the one that he went to require even more intelligence to get into than Donald Trump has. For people who keep score about this sort of thing, which is to say the Trumps of this world, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia have always been ranked far above Wharton, the school Donald Trump is so proud to claim but is not so proud to claim him, now that he tries to use his college as proof of his intelligence. It is very, very hard, if not impossible, to prove intelligence. But proving a lack of intelligence is much, much easier. Here's a perfect example.
I'm a very intelligent person.
That functions as a proof of the opposite. No intelligent person ever says, I'm a very intelligent person. Bill Gates, who went to Harvard and has made astronomically more money than Donald Trump, which Donald Trump also seems to consider a measure of intelligence, has never said, I'm a very intelligent person. Einstein didn't say, I'm a very intelligent person. Einstein certainly heard a lot of other people say that about him. Barack Obama, who went to Columbia and Harvard Law School, never said, I'm a very intelligent person. Bill Clinton, who was a Rhodes Scholar and a Yale Law School graduate, never said, I'm a very intelligent person. The only president who has ever said, I'm a very intelligent person, is the president with the least fluency in the English language and the provably smallest vocabulary.
I had the best words.
A few minutes after saying, I am a very intelligent person, before boarding a helicopter on the White House lawn, Donald Trump once again disputed what Myesha Johnson said about his condolence call for the loss of her husband, LaDavid Johnson, in combat.
It made me cry because I was very angry at the tone of his voice and how he said it. Like he couldn't remember my husband's name.
And after listening to her say that, here is what the president said about that today.
I was really nice to her. I respect her. I respect her family. I certainly respect LaDavid, who I, by the way, called LaDavid right from the beginning. Just so you understand, they put a chart in front, LaDavid, says LaDavid Johnson. So I called right from the beginning. There's no hesitation. One of the great memories of all time. There was no hesitation. I think she's a fantastic woman. I was extremely nice to her, extremely respectful.
So his defense on remembering the name is that they put a chart in front of him with the name. So how could he possibly have failed to mention the name LaDavid Johnson?
So I called right from the beginning. There's no hesitation. One of the great memories of all time. There was no hesitation. I think she's a fantastic woman. I was extremely nice to her, extremely respectful.
One of the great memories of all time. What does that mean? For Donald Trump, a condolence call to a grieving widow who's lost her husband in combat, whose body could not be recovered for 2 days. For Donald Trump, that is one of the great memories of all time? That call for Donald Trump was like a little kid watching his favorite team win the World Series. One of the great memories of all time. That's what that sentence actually means in the flow of those sentences. But because Donald Trump is such a lazy and incompetent user of the English language, it could mean something else. Donald Trump speaks quickly in order to prevent interruptions, but he is very, very lazy about including every word that a sentence or a paragraph needs to make sense, or every word that a sentence needs to convey what he actually might mean. And so some Trump scholars, looking at that line, one of the great memories of all time, jammed in the middle of his description of that phone call, might read that to be a disjointed Trump boast about how great his memory is. Therefore, Donald Trump is right and Myesha Johnson is wrong, because it is impossible for the widow of that Army sergeant to have a better memory than someone who went to an Ivy League college, someone who has a very high intelligence and who has the greatest memory of all time. Now, I have no doubt that people who are still tonight Trump supporters believe that there is absolutely no comparison between Myesha Johnson's memory and one of the great memories of all time, the memory that belongs to Donald Trump. People who are still Trump supporters seem to believe in Donald Trump's personal superiority over everyone, including themselves, in all things: wealth, intelligence, memory. Republican Senator Jeff Flake was never a believer in Donald Trump. He boldly refused to endorse Donald Trump in the campaign last year, even after Trump was the Republican nominee. And Senator Flake publicly disclosed that he did not vote for Donald Trump on Election Day. In response to Senator Flake's eloquent speech against the president in the Senate yesterday, when the senator announced that he would not be running for re-election, Donald Trump decided that the best way to handle Jeff Flake today was the classic Trumpian way. It was to simply lie about him.
He wrote a book about me before I ever met him, before I ever heard his name. I mean, he came out with this horrible book, and I said, who is this guy?
That is a lie. Jeff Flake's book, Conscience of a Conservative, came out 7 months into the Trump presidency. Came out this summer, 2017. You just heard Donald Trump say he wrote a book about me before I ever met him. Donald Trump met Jeff Flake a year before Jeff Flake's book came out. It was in a meeting with Senate Republicans before the Republican convention last summer in order to try to build party unity. Here is part of the Washington Post's account of that meeting. Trump's most tense exchange was with Senator Jeff Flake. When Flake stood up and introduced himself, Trump told him, "You've been very critical of me. Yes, I'm the other senator from Arizona, the one who didn't get captured, and I want to talk to you about statements like that," Flake responded, according to 2 Republican officials.
He wrote a book about me before I ever met him, before I ever heard his name.
That is what Donald Trump looks like when he's lying. He knew exactly who Senator Jeff Flake was by the time Jeff Flake's book came out. Here is the other lie that criticism from other Republican senators like Bob Corker and McCain provoked today.
We have a very good relationship. Honestly, when you take a look at what's happened with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and the hatred and the division and the animosity, I'll tell you what, honestly, the Republicans are very, very well united.
Oh, yeah, it is vicious these days between Hillary and Bernie. Hillary Clinton called Bernie Sanders lying Bernie today, and Bernie Sanders called Hillary Clinton little Hillary. Only in the fevered madness of the brain of Donald Trump. Of course they didn't do that. They never did that. They would never do that. There is only one politician on the national stage so utterly uncouth as to have launched personal attacks that Donald Trump has launched at Democrats and Republicans. In fact, he has personally attacked, ridiculed, and given condescending nicknames to more Republicans than Democrats. No president in history has ever behaved this way, and no president in history has ever failed as completely as Donald Trump has so far failed in pushing his legislative agenda through a Congress whose Republican leadership he has attacked repeatedly. And he has now been rewarded with an all-time low. In a new Fox News poll tonight, 38% approve of Donald Trump's job performance, 57% disapprove. Intelligence is hard to measure. It might be impossible to measure. IQ tests were an attempt to evaluate students' intelligence when Donald Trump was a kid, but they have been largely abandoned because intelligence is a multi-dimensional can memorize. Once you begin to try to describe what intelligence is, you see the difficulty of trying to measure it. But Donald Trump, of course, knows none of this. Donald Trump firmly believes that intelligence is measurable and describable, especially his own.
I went to an Ivy League college. I was a nice...
Just tests of knowledge, not intelligence. You can memorize your way to very high scores on SATs, but the capacity for memorization is not intelligence. Machine-dimensional, dynamic, fluid brain function that cannot be reliably and consistently captured for everyone in any test. SAT tests are really